Hey, deserving listeners, it is time to watch 90 Day Fiancé. I'm going to react to it. Let's watch.
If I didn't leave, they will set me up. I will lose now everything. Not only my job, I will lose my life. When I was working in the law enforcement, you actually have to do things like things that are not actually legal because somebody asked you to do it. You have connections. That's how it is. It's like a mob.
All right, so I haven't been showing a lot of clips, but just to catch everyone up, the family went behind Andrei's back and approached his friend who was on the police force with Andrei, and the friend revealed that the police force is very corrupt, and while the two of them were working for the police, they were asked to do illegal things, and at a certain point for Andrei, he said, okay, I have three choices. I either continue to go down this road of immorality and corruption and maybe earn a lot of money but do things that I don't want to do, or I can go against the system and end up being framed and go to jail or maybe even be killed, or I can flee the country and just get away from it all. And he chose to flee the country. And if that is true, which I can absolutely imagine, and the friend and Andrei are convincingly telling that story, which I can absolutely believe. I mean, who knows? They could both be lying, but if they're not, that sounds terrible, right? You get a job and they ask you to do things immoral, maybe murder. I mean, who knows what they were involved in? So that gives us more background on Andrei, and maybe that's where his issues of superiority and dominance are at least partially derived from, in terms of the traumas that are involved in that. When you've been traumatized and you've been made to feel powerless, then sometimes you will have a complex around power and around being dominant over other people and being very worried about being submissive or in a weak position. And Andrei seems to definitely exhibit that. We also heard from people close to Andrei that when he was growing up, he was impulsive, but he wasn't really a hothead. He wasn't violent. He wasn't aggressive. And the aggressive behavior that he exhibited towards the family was unique. They seemed to be believable in that situation, so it gives us a little bit more background. Maybe he had some tendency to be impulsive, maybe a little aggressiveness. He goes into the police force. He experiences trauma there, not only by having to do things he doesn't want to do to other people, but also being threatened and being afraid for his life. That it could be obviously extremely traumatic, right? So that's one thing. Now, the family and the brother, Charlie, Elizabeth's brother, the whole time is like, he's extremely skeptical of it. Okay, fine. But the father seems to be on board with it, and Jen, the sister, seems to understand it as well. The other thing that I haven't been showing, by the way, is that as soon as Jen landed, and I don't know if she's playing it up for the cameras, but she has been making fun of and ridiculing Moldova in multiple different ways. And again, the ugly Americanism in this family is extremely high. To travel to another country and as soon as you get off the plane, you're just making fun, especially in front of Andrei. It's one thing to do it behind closed doors as you're venting about something, but it's another thing to do it in front of Andrei. I mean, it's definitely punching down in a lot of ways, and it's like, what did you expect? Moldova is not a rich country. It has issues. Do you go to Mexico and just go like, ew, everything's disgusting? It's like, it's not their fault, you understand? It's not like people in other countries wake up and say, let's make our country crappy and compared to the United States. Like, we understand that there's atrocities and politics and corruption and war and all sorts of factors that play into a community having issues. People don't choose that. There are multiple factors that play into it. And this attitude of just like, I don't know, it's really, really gross. And I wanted to include it, but I don't know, it's just hard to watch, honestly. Because if it was just that, and, if it was just these individuals saying a few things, but I know as an American, the kinds of things and the attitudes that people have, maybe even right next door to me, I find to just be incredibly saddening to me, and it just depresses me and demoralizes me. And I know Americans are not the only people who have these kinds of attitudes. I'm also half Japanese. I know Japanese people have a lot of these attitudes as well, so it's not just an American thing. And it is, it's what fuels so many problems in the world. Inhumane behavior towards others, dehumanization, colonization, wars, just all this stuff. It's just like, can't you just understand that everyone is trying their best and that people are, good on the inside instead of a threat constantly? And do you constantly have to assert your supposed superiority over other people? Are you that insecure? Anyway, so there's that issue. Now, Libby is understandably upset because she is learning for the very first time a very important detail about her husband's history, something that is very concerning to her. And she would want to know that. And I'm guessing Libby is feeling like, well, what else haven't you told me? And I thought we were close. I thought you would tell me this sort of stuff. And, it's valid. Now, from Andrei's point of view, he actually might have felt it would help Libby and everyone else if he didn't talk about it. I hope people understand that when you speak freely about corruption, and he even compared it to the mob, that you put a target on your back and maybe even the people around you. So it is a good idea to not talk about it so that word doesn't get out that you're talking about it, so that the mob, the police force in Moldova, doesn't have any reason to target him. Now, I'm taking everyone's word for it that the Moldovan police is corrupt. I have no idea. But anyway, it's possible that for Andrei, he didn't say anything because he was trying to protect people, or he was ashamed of some of the things that he did because he was being pressured by the other police officers to do things that he is incredibly ashamed of doing, or he's traumatized by it. That's another possibility, is that this is a source of deep trauma, and he actually gets triggered when he thinks about those things, and his distress spikes, and all sorts of terrible things happen for him physiologically and psychologically. And so he doesn't want to bring it up for that reason. In the same way that veterans will come back from war, and people will pepper them with questions, and sometimes because of trauma, they'll just be like, look, stop asking me questions. I don't want to talk about it. Lay off. So, I hope some understanding of all this, or, Andrei is able to explain it in a way that is, conducive to all those possible issues.
How are you able to even be here right now and walk around in public?
Because I settled it down. I left.
Before?
Law enforcement is like in a mob. You have to live right. I left not right. I spoke with the people and they let me go. I don't have any ties to that. Now it's fine.
So again, if we take his word for it, I think some sympathy from Libby is in order. I mean, her husband was in a life or death situation and a traumatic, terrible situation. So some empathy for him in this moment. Now, Andrei doesn't help anyone with this about helping people empathize with him because he doesn't exhibit his vulnerability. If he did, I'm guessing Libby would know to be empathetic, but maybe she will know anyway. Let's listen.
So
that's what you need to understand.
Okay,
That's it.
all right. I get it. Okay, I get it. That's not so bad. You could have just told me that from the beginning. We're getting married tomorrow, and I feel like I don't even know my husband.
Okay, I get it, Libby, but listen to what he just told you. He told you that he was in a police force for a while. They made him do terrible things. He ran away in fear, which is pretty obvious. He ran because he was afraid of retribution and he didn't want to do immoral things. And then he had to go back to them to make it right so that they wouldn't come after him so that he could return home and visit his family. Does that not provoke any kind of empathy or concern or compassion? Like, whoa. Now, this is another American privilege thing that might be at play. If you've never experienced that, or you don't know anyone who's really experienced that kind of strife and trauma, you might just be like, oh, well, okay. Anyway, moving on. Whereas, if you've actually been through that kind of corruption, if you've actually been in a mob or a gang that you either are all in or they will take retribution on you, then maybe you don't know how it feels. But anyway, I understand where she's coming from. This is a concerning piece of information that she wished she would have known, but I would have wished she could see past that and understand that Andrei deserves at least some kind of compassion, like some statement of just like, honey, I'm so sorry you went through that. And I'm so glad that you did leave because that means that you're a good person. So, will someone tell him that, please? Now, maybe he's lying, but if you believe him, then I think he deserves something along those lines.
And you thought that you may lose your beloved one, you do the same. Sorry for not telling you. Sorry that it may hurt you right now. I regret my past. I didn't want to lose you, but I'm clean. I'm not a mob member. I'm not no.
Okay, good. So he's really, I'm glad he said that. I was suspecting that. It's like, I didn't tell you because if I told you, you would have been in danger. And so I'm sorry I didn't tell you. And I get it, but I told you because I care about you and I don't want you to get hurt. So let's see what Libby says to that.
Like, I'm not nobody to be afraid of. This is what it is. Nothing else. Come here. Come on. It's all good, babe.
All right, so they seem to be making up, but I wish someone would tell Andrei that if this is true, he did a noble thing. And he also survived a extremely terrible situation. So I know he gives off this tough exterior, but we all understand that he is a gooey mess of vulnerability underneath that veil of aggressiveness and I don't care-ness.
You have to be honest with me, always. You can't hide from your past and lie to me. I'm your wife.
Okay, again, Libby, I get it. And I absolutely will acknowledge that even though there was a valid reason why he didn't tell her, to suddenly hear some important information would be very dysregulating. Just be like, wait a second, what else haven't you told me? Is there a whole set of other things? It can be I understand that, but he just told you he went through a horrible situation, something that I'm guessing, Libby, you've never even come close to. So a little bit of sympathy would be in order and would help their relationship. He struggles with vulnerability. So when he approaches vulnerability, which he just did, you have to capitalize on that and actually provide some care for that vulnerability.
To me, and telling me exactly what he did as an investigator, it does make me feel a little better. I understand, like, there's certain things that he had to do, and that's just kind of how it goes. But he needs to know that if he's honest with me, no matter what it is, like, I will still accept him and love him.
All right, so that's a good message, and I'm glad she's saying that. Hopefully he hears that. But again, it wasn't about that. He was actually not talking about it because if he talked about it, the mob would come after him. Have you ever seen, maybe she doesn't watch any mob movies. Watch The Sopranos or something, because that's essentially where he came from.
I love you. That's all it matters.
There's nothing else.
Nothing else. And
Nothing else that you need to tell me.
No.
You're sure?
Yes. We're moving forward, okay? I was afraid that if I'll tell Elizabeth the whole truth, in all details, I'm afraid that I would have lost her.
Right. So another vulnerable moment for him, which is great. And I suspected that as well, that if he told her all the details, meaning the things that he was asked to do, the things that he participated in, then she would leave him. And he might be very ashamed of the things that he did. And hopefully he can get therapy or someone to talk to, because those kinds of events can really affect people moving forward. We have this, and when we watch the mob movies, there's this feeling like the person in power, the person who is dominating and murdering others and controlling others, it feels like, well, they're on top, and so they don't have, we have this model of trauma where if you're the one being victimized, then you're the one that's being traumatized. But that actually isn't true for a lot of people. If you care about other human beings, which most people do, even if you're being asked to, even if you're giving orders, like in war, for example, I'll just talk about that. There's countless reports going back hundreds of years in the military and soldiers talking about how even though they were trained and even though it was life or death and even though it was me or them, the soldier is right across the way and I've got to shoot them, that they have a really hard time actually shooting another human being. In the movies, they don't really depict this very often. And in fact, they almost never do. But it's, in fact, I think in World War II, it was actually this huge problem where people, or World War I, the soldiers were actually shooting over the enemy's heads because they didn't want to they didn't want to kill another human being. And it's also, if you do harm another human being, even if you're at war, even if you're in a mob and you're supposed to do these things, it traumatizes the individual who is doing it often. So this notion of, even though your life wasn't really in danger and you weren't the one that was harmed, that everything is fine is false. It's quite possible that he has a lot of traumas around that, and maybe that's what he's been running from, and maybe it's contributing to some of his behaviors that we've been seeing on the show. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself and take care of others, because we all deserve it. We really, really do.